Hello, Diana.
Hello, good
There we go.
afternoon, everyone. Hi, Karl.
Could you just give you a quick introduction to you and your company?
So OneAgrix, we are a faith-based food and FMCG digital trade ecosystem. So we connect food service buyers and retailers with suppliers of halal, kosher, and vegan inventories. So what we do is we have two engines, the trade engine, and then the traceability engine, where we enable brand visibility and protection for suppliers. And then when we take that, and then we empower buyers with transparent product discovery, sourcing, and purchasing all in one platform. So that's what OneAgrix is doing, together with our amazing partners, including Morpheus.
Okay. And can you just give us an idea of how many countries or geographies you work in? A rough idea of the number of transactions in your trading platform? Just it'd be great for the audience to understand the scale and the scope of what you're offering.
Okay. So it's a very interesting growth at OneAgrix in terms of the contracts that we've been signing ever since the pandemic. So what we see is, and I just wanted to give a background story so the audience could appreciate and the, why platforms are important and why, digitalization in supply chain is important. So when we saw the food crisis happening post the Ukrainian and Russian strife, and then we see the pandemic, what we see is a broken supply chain. And from there, what we saw was many manufacturers were scrambling for alternative supplies. And what we did was, when we, brought up the platform and we said we are faith-based food, we realized in a food security perspective as well, that's where we realized billions of, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, and communities who are, consuming vegan food in different countries all over the world realize that this is an issue. So what they do is they come to OneAgrix and started procuring and inquiring about, hey, do you have different food ingredients from alternative sources that we normally, procure from? And from there, we saw an uptick of about $1.1 billion in contract of ever since then. And it's, it's increasing every day. And that's about the numbers that I could give now publicly.
Okay, fantastic. And what's your thoughts on frictionless trade?
I think we've been advocating as an ecosystem, ourselves and our ecosystem partners, on frictionless trade. And really, that's really a broad term. When we say frictionless trade, I can only speak for ourselves and our experience, in the faith-based community, we see many hundreds of certification bodies all over the world, different standards. And that has been really a huge problem for a really huge market. So you talk about halal, you talk about kosher, very strictly regulated certificates. And the faith-based market, we are trading at about $1.4 trillion. People are always surprised when they find that out. The next economy is really the faith-based economy. And what we see is fragmentation. More work needs to be done to smoothen trade, and also an increasing need for ecosystems and governments to work together in terms of the data perspective. So that's the data side. And the trade side is the distribution side. Less middlemen in between, especially exploitative one. More, digital ecosystems are now allowing to level the playing field for manufacturers all over the world to trade directly with faith-based communities or faith-based buyers from different parts of the world. So what we see is leveraging AI, leveraging blockchain technology, leveraging the numerous technological tools. So we are seeing that change now. It's really interesting.
One of the key things we wanted to dive into there, Diana, is obviously you're a trading platform. You bring, let's say, buyers or sellers and buyers together. What are they telling you about the importance of standards for data in exchange? So I'll give you some examples, right? Maybe it's certificates of origin, maybe it's halal certificates. What's really in the data set for your customers, which is becoming critical to digitize in order to create this concept of frictionless trade?
Yes, so that's a very important question, Karl. So a few years ago, exactly 2 years ago, Bloomberg reported a really huge food scandal in halal. And it caught the entire industry globally by storm. And then unanswered questions started, coming like, oh no, what are we eating? The faith-based community, are they really food secure? Is it food insecure? And that's just one part of the world. And in Canada, there's also a kosher scandal where they found in kosher meat, and it was, it also, shook the country. So what we are seeing here is, in the data perspective, yes, there needs to be more digitalization or more anti-counterfeiting measures in terms of issuing those certificates, because then at customs, it could be then checked and referenced and verified. So it may seem simple, as I've mentioned it now, but it's not, because then you are dealing with hundreds of certification bodies, and getting them to harmonize for 2 decades has not happened. But then, we had a conversation with, our amazing advisor, John Keogh, and, he's an expert in food safety and supply chain. And he mentioned to me, and I think this is very important for everyone in supply chain, that we need to find an equalizer in those standards rather than harmonizing everyone. And, sometimes can be a bit of an ego game with everyone. Yep. It is wise for us to, okay, let's be adults, let's check now, where can we meet in the middle, find an equalizers set of data, and then we trade. So that's where I think we should be looking at in terms of frictionless trade.
Okay. A quick question for you, Diana, on that point is, we hear about these standards around e-phyto, right? Which is obviously, again, plant-based or food-based food standards and certification. Is there anything like that happening in the global faith-based marketplace, or we're still using maybe a PDF document that's created and we're sharing PDFs? Where is the digitization frontier currently?
Okay, Karl. That question is it's a very major question, and there is many accreditation and bodies that we need to keep mindful of as well, and their methods and standards. So I'm aware that digitalization in halal certification bodies, in even different types of certificates are happening right now. Whether it's fast enough, the answer is it can be better. But all I want to say is it is happening right now. There is conversations surrounding digitalization, making processes faster, issuing certificate not only quicker, but making sure that they are safe and can't be counterfeited. We have such conversations in the Middle East. We have such conversations in Asia as well. As you know, in fact, the largest certification body is in Asia, without naming names. And, we are increasingly looking at making that more
streamlined and more simple, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we're talking about digitization, obviously there's a lot of data that we're collecting from different data sources or different entities, if you like, stakeholders in the supply chain, from the supplier through the stakeholders, the carriers moving goods, ports, all the way through to consumers. An EBL is a good example, an electronic bill of lading. I see now certain countries have adopted the standards. I think it's good. What we need to do then is educate the wider marketplace in the benefits of going fully digital. So in an event I was at in Rotterdam, Talk Europe, which is usually a congress around maritime trade, and they were saying the biggest, I would say, break on EBLs was actually the banks pushing back to say, they're very traditional. We need to use maybe paper. That's what we trust. Again, just using like an EBL example, do you really see an halal certificate coming anytime soon? And what would be the stakeholder, I would say, barriers to having that adoption?
So, Karl, very interesting. Today, the questions that you ask are also, almost political. But I'll be as insightful as possible. Now, in terms of e-halal, why I say that it is, there can never be just an e-halal or e-kosher, for example. Let me tell you why. Because part of the process, if you notice, requires still a certain level of intimacy in the sense of the prayers. And it cannot be necessarily, digitized. You can't just, switch on the radio and just let the prayers be done and at the point of, making food faith-based, right? So I think what we need to do is to find points of where in that process of certification where we can shorten the timeline to certificate, how we can protect those certificates. So I think it's a holistic view. And, honestly, with the whole world talking about digitalization, supply chain, let's make everything digitalized. Let's be realistic, because certain processes still requires a certain amount of human connection, human involvement. It's more about how do we use certain technologies to make sure that, those bad actors in the supply chain are reduced.
Okay.
So if you talk, so halal certificate, e-halal, maybe in certain parts of e-halal, that you can make it digitalized, but not every part, especially, the sacred prayer parts. And I think the faith-based community could appreciate that as well.
Okay, good. Thanks for that feedback, Diana. What are you seeing from your customers and your partners around the issues of sustainability, and how will that shape the future supply chains? What are your thoughts on sustainability?
How we see at OneAgrix sustainability is really in a supplier diversity angle. And if you look at the US right now, which we're increasingly building footprint, at OneAgrix and our partners, is where we are looking at, okay, how do we support, suppliers from different backgrounds, suppliers, and that includes from different parts of the world. Normally, when people talk about supplier diversity, they talk about, helping those different ethnic communities, but it's perfect for faith-based communities as well, because then you can support, a really, high quality manufacturer with faith-based food products in Turkey. There are many of them in the OIC countries. I would love to shout that out. In Middle East, we went to Saudi, and Saudi has amazing products. And they are looking also at the US market, and we look at different UAE as well. We have as you know, Karl, we spent some time running businesses together in February, and we can see UAE, they're interested in going in exporting as well. So when you talk about sustainability for us, it is really in supplier diversity, because that's where we can see immediate action. We can take action. We can suggest, okay, you want supplier diversity in your supermarkets? There we go. You have a portfolio of really amazing companies that you can support.
You probably deal with a large range, from multi-billion-dollar companies to small suppliers. How are you seeing your ecosystem help connect different stakeholders, different partners to really kind of enable global trade and kind of bring in this concept of frictionless trade?
We need to talk about collaborating mindfully and connecting different ecosystems. So get out of the mindset of competition, but more, collaboration, right? Or co-competition, for example. Some people like to use that word. Yes, so I think that we need to address that. First, why? Because then regulatory barriers will be actually lowered down. Think about it. If other ecosystems work together in numerous countries, then how would data be then? It'd be more accessible. Data would be shared in a better way. Find equivalency, as I mentioned just now. So building a connected network is good. Yes, that sounds great. However, I think we need to, like what Uncle say, it takes time, but there needs to be a mindset shift that, we're not competing. For global trade to happen, we need to distribute food all over the world. It is a necessity. And I think it's better to not work in silos, in your own silo ecosystem, but then, connect together. So that's what we see in the global market.
A lot of people now, a lot of the world's consumers are a lot more dialed in on the challenges of supply chain. I think, again, the pandemic brought that home. We've talked a little bit about sustainability, but what are you seeing from changing consumer expectations, and how much of that is driving your supply chain sourcing and logistics decisions? So talk a little bit about the consumer demographics you might serve, and also, what are their expectations, and are we really fulfilling their expectations, in the world of supply chains?
So serving the faith-based community is really interesting for us, and it's also very personal for many. And what we see is, to be honest, we have not been fulfilling that fast enough. I think the focus has always been, and I think when you serve faith-based communities, there's also a certain type of, and I'll be honest, like, okay, how big is the market even? Why are we spotlighting, this few faith-based community? the thing is, I always, spotlight that it's $1 billion industry, $1 trillion in fact. That's one. Second, but in a sustainability perspective, for me as well as someone who's in alignment of a certain faith, we are looking at food security. So what we see here is, are we even looking after our citizens in our countries with their faith-based needs? Food security includes communities that are vegan, that are eating vegan food, that are eating kosher food, that are eating halal food. So for now, at OneAgrix, we see that increase, which is very good for us, because then, as a business, to be sustainable, we also are able to fulfill the needs of billions of people around the world. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Secondly, consumer expectations of not only having big food in their cabinets and on their food shelves, they want to also support indie brands or, smaller brands. They want to be able, I think this younger generation is really interesting. They want to experience the big brands, but they want to experience big brands that, procure from, the smaller players. At the same time, smaller indie brands that actually do high quality products. So that's one interesting trend we see. And the last one is we see trade transparency. There's an increased need on food traceability. Now it can come in different form. We can come, a simple, QR code is just getting information, but they really want to know, okay, the ingredients, where are they from? Do companies procure ingredients which are not tagged to any slavery of any kind? That's one. Carbon footprint, that's one. And there's numerous research that has shown that consumers are willing to pay up to 20% more so that they have those information, so that they have those assurances.
What do we think these emerging technologies like AI, like IoT and blockchain will impact the future of the supply chain?
When we have conversations, it is not about the technology. It's about, how do you make my processes better? How do you make our bottom line, better? Those are the conversations that we want. IoT will help you with making sure that your products in that supply chain are well taken care of. How? And with that, then in product recall, you actually save much more, even though they don't see it immediately. But when the product recalls happen and lawsuits happen, that's where everyone's scrambling. Oh no, we should have done better. We should have implemented this IoT technology, for example. We should have implemented blockchain, for example, or the numerous technologies. And when I say blockchain, it's not on the crypto side at all. People always have that misconception. Blockchain is more of the DLT side of things. How do we, use blockchain to make sure that our data will be untampered, for example? And those are very important measures to be done. Then there comes the other type of technologies, DNA traceability. Other, serialization technology, all those numerous technologies. Why I say modular is because, like what Uncle say, companies need to see which one will impact my business immediately first, and then have the rest. One last thing, you talk about regulations. Now, there is an increasing need in terms of a regulatory requirement. If you look at US FDA recently, they do have on traceabilities in the FTL list. Certain ingredients need to be properly traced. And you look at the German Supply Chain Act, and you look in Canada also, it has the Supply Chain Act. And what we see is, yes, companies need to be aware, if they are exporting, they need to have all these, measures in place. That's why IoT is important. Your cold chain tracking is important. I think from there, then it's frictionless trade. It's not smoke and mirrors, as I mentioned. The mindset has to be in a very growth mindset. Technology is a tool, and we have to adapt, and we have to see how does it impact supply chains. So not smoke and mirrors until we implement. So implementation is key.